In dispatch, the revenue recognition of the entity is that the revenue is recognized as soon as the goods are dispatched, and in terms of the contract with the customer, the risk and reward of the goods have been immediately transferred. In this context, what will happen is the goods have been dispatched, the revenue has been recognized by the supplier. So what is the position under GST? Even under GST, it is considered as a supply immediately once the goods have been removed. And in the context of the recipient now, what happens is goods have not been received into his premises. So will he be able to take input tax credit on goods which have not been received, but a copy of the invoice has come to his premise? The next issue which may arise is if the goods have been received, invoice have been received, there is one more condition under the input tax credit saying that if the payment has not been made within 180 days, input tax credit which has been claimed will have to be reversed. So this 180 days criteria, is it to be considered from the date of receipt of goods or date of invoice? These are certain examples which I am just and these will be taken up in detail as when the subsequent slide comes. Now in the same example, if the supplier has an agreement saying that the transfer of property in goods happens when the goods reach the customer's premise. So in this context, what will happen is the revenue is not recognized in the books of accounts. Say this happens at the fag end of March. The goods have been removed on 31st March 2019. But because of these certain issues, the goods couldn't reach the premises of the customer. So whether this is recorded as a revenue in the accounts in the context of the agreement will have to be checked, and whether input tax credit can be claimed by the person on receipt of goods. Next is where goods are made available to the customer by giving possession at his factory gate. Impact of input tax and output tax applicability will have to be checked. In this context, what are the certain documents which a person will have to verify? In the case of outward supplies, it will be a customer, then the tax invoice, then the delivery challan, then the e-way bill. And in the context of a person receiving the goods, it will be the invoice, yes, for sure. Then we will verify the receipt of goods. But how do we verify the receipt of goods? Is it just by verifying the accounts, the ledger extracts, or do we take one step ahead? In this context, we will have to see even the gate pass, whether the gate pass register has all these goods receipts. Just a background of recent amendment which has happened. In the context of annual return, the threshold limit has been increased to 2 crores for filing an annual return. Persons who have an annual turnover of less than 2 crores 2018-19. Mandatory for filing. The recent notification 16 of 2020 dated 23/3/2020 has increased the threshold limit for filing of GSTR 9C. Now every registered person whose aggregate turnover, all India basis we have to see, not state wise, the turnover of the registered person who is registered in various states, if it is not exceeding 5 crores, they have been given a relaxation not to file GST content. It is important to note what has been mentioned. Not all the paragraphs have been mentioned here. Certain relevant paragraphs have been taken. Says that I or we report that the said registered person has maintained. So we are required to report whether the records and documents as required by the IGST Act or knowledge and information and explanations given to him. The particulars 9C are true and fair subject to his observation. Earlier when the form was released, it had used the word true and correct. Then subsequently, it has been changed to true and fair. So before commencing an audit, what are the various groundwork an auditor has to do before he commences an audit? These aspects are done in other audit, but as a background, when a person is limiting his audit to certain particular act, there is a possibility that we may miss certain things. So just an initial groundwork or a background what an auditor has to do. Understand the client's business. What is the nature of business? Is he a manufacturer, a service provider, a trader? Nature of industry it operates. Gather some basic information, how the industry operates and how the transactions are recorded and how are the revenue recognized in the context of the industry in which the client operates. The nature of various transactions which are carried out by the auditee. Entity structure. Here, entity structure means whether it is a holding company, a subsidiary company, what is the structure of it, because this becomes important, because if it is a company which is incorporated outside India and it is having a subsidiary in India, what are the implications of reverse charge mechanism? Then what are the implications of supplies which have been made from India to outside India? How does it impact those aspects will have to be checked. Then generally we miss on to these aspects. Getting the appointment letter from the auditee before commencing an audit. In case the audit has been done by an auditor, some other auditor, and a new auditor has been appointed, the person has to take a no objection certificate from the previous auditor. And here the crucial role starts: preparation of audit program, the checklists which have to be prepared. So what do you mean by preparation of an audit program? When an audit has to be done, how will be done? Who will be the supplies? Will be your sales register, sales register, which is colloquially used. It is the outward supplier with the goods, services, and a mix of supply of goods or services. And in case there is something called as mixed supply or composite supply in the GST Act, how this mixed supply and composite supply has been treated in the books of accounts will be relevant in the context of GST also. Then in the context of inward supplies, we will have to get an extract of inward supplies which will show the invoice number, invoice date, nature of goods, the GST Act, where the ITC has to be reversed by, you will have to refer section 17(5) of the GST Act. Now, what are the other documents in respect of outward supplies? Outward supplies will involve the tax invoice to be maintained, a bill of supply. A bill of supply is to be issued under the GST Act in case of supplies of exempted goods or services. Then a delivery challan, credit notes, debit notes. The credit note, debit notes aspect are very relevant in the context of credit note. Certain aspects have to be kept in mind relating to when a credit note can be issued with GST, when a credit note cannot be issued with the GST. Receipt vouchers. What is a receipt voucher in the context of GST? A receipt voucher is required to be issued in the GST Act. For goods, the requirement of payment of GST on receipt of advances has been done away with. But for services, a registered person is required to pay GST on receipt of advances. So when a person receives advances, they are required to issue a receipt voucher. And when the supply is completed, the registered person is required to issue a tax invoice. So receipt voucher is different from payment voucher. Will this in what context a payment voucher is required? Then a refund voucher. When is a refund voucher required? A refund voucher is required to be issued when an advance has been given by a person for supply of services, and subsequently the recipient says that no, I want to cancel your services, please refund me the amount. In this context, what is the document which is required to be issued in the GST is a refund voucher and not a credit note. So please be careful. In the case where advances have been received for services, if the contract for service has been cancelled and if the amount is required to be refunded, a refund voucher will have to be issued and not a credit note. Then what are the other records which are to be maintained is record of import of goods, export of goods, import of services, export of services, supplies attracting payment of tax on reverse charge along with relevant documents. What are the documents for reverse charge? We will cover it in the subsequent discussions. Service provider to maintain details of goods used in providing services. I think this is a very unique requirement, saying that service provider is required to supply services considering the composite supply and mixed supply. So assuming that it is a supply of services, in case of AMC, the goods which have been used for providing the services will have to be maintained. One illustration in respect of uh, details of goods to be used in providing services. Details of goods and capital goods sent to job worker and received back. Here this is very important because there are certain conditions envisaged when goods are sent to a job worker and they have to be returned back, because in case of goods I mean to say inputs or raw materials which are sent to a job worker, they have to be received back by the principal within 1 year from the date of supply, and in case of capital goods within 1 year from the date when the goods have been sent to a job worker. So in this context, register has to be obtained from the auditee, asking him to provide the details of all these inputs or capital goods which have been sent for the job work purposes. Then the next one is a specific requirement for manufacturer to maintain accounts of production showing quantity details of raw materials used in the manufacture, quantitative details of goods so manufactured, including the waste and byproducts thereof. So details of waste and byproducts which have been generated during the course of manufacture, these details also have to be maintained, and how they have been disposed of and how the tax has been remitted in the context of the waste and scrap will also have to be maintained. Accounts of advances received, paid and adjustments made thereof. This will be important in the context of service providers. As I mentioned, for manufacturers, requirement to pay tax on receipt of advances for supply of goods, it is required in the context of services now. Then details of tax payable, tax collected and paid, input tax credit claimed and availed. Then a register of tax invoice, a credit note, debit note, delivery challan. Then particulars of name and complete address of suppliers from whom he has received the goods or services chargeable to tax. It is also requiring, just as I mentioned, where the input tax register should contain the name of the supplier and the GSTN. Here, if you see even the rules and section of the CGST, it mentions that the name and complete address of the supplier who has supplied the goods has to be maintained. And also it is suggested that even the GSTN classification of goods, services, everything is maintained, so that during the course of assessment also it will be easy to it will be easy to demonstrate what are the various inputs of goods and services which a person has availed. Name and complete address of the person to whom he has supplied the goods or services. Even this is required to be maintained. The complete address of the premises where the goods are stored by him, including goods stored during the transit, along with particulars of stock stored therein. So it is not only the manufacturing premises, even if there is a separate warehouse which is there, complete address of all those things have to be maintained. The person who is registered under the, there is a specific requirement which are required to be maintained by a works contractor. The name and address of the person on whose behalf the works contract is executed, description, value and quantity wherever applicable of goods or services received for the execution of works contract, description, value and quantity of goods or services utilized in the execution of works contract, details of payment received in respect of works executed by the contractor, the names and addresses of suppliers from whom he has received the goods or services. In addition to regular details which I have discussed in the earlier slides, these are the specific requirements which are required to be maintained by a contractor. We are to all these records which have been mentioned in the CGST Act have been maintained by the registered person. If they have not been maintained, the same will have to be discussed with the registered person. Is there any other method in which he has maintained these records? If they are maintained, it has to be verified, and if the auditor is satisfied about those records maintained, then he need not make a observation. We'll have to be careful while giving any note in our GST or 9C audit report. There is a distinguishing between an observation and a qualification. So what is an observation, what is a qualification is a thin line, and qualification has a very bigger ramification vis-a-vis a observation. In context of qualification, if anything is done by an auditor, it is required that it is quantified, assuming if there is some issues in the aspect of claim of intent, it has just not to mention that there is issue in the claim of input tax credit. The auditor is also required to quantify what is the incorrect input tax credit which a registered person has claimed. What are the various reports which a auditor has to gather at the time of conducting an audit? If the person who is conducting the GST audit is different from the person who is conducted a statutory audit of a company, then the statutory audit report of the company has to be gathered. Internal auditor's report has to be taken. Income tax audit report, transfer pricing report in case of international MNCs who have a presence across the globe. One point we have to keep in mind is here many questions have been raised whether an internal auditor can do an audit under the GST Act. The GST manual issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants mentions that an internal auditor cannot conduct a GST audit, but there is no bar on a statutory auditor to conduct a GST audit. This is one of the critical aspects which a person has to do, has to ensure that the internal auditors are not the GST auditors. This has to be taken into account. Now, having discussed the various records which a entity is required to maintain and what are the supporting documents which have to be maintained under the GST Act, let us discuss the aspect of the various issues which come up in GST audit. I've split this up into three aspects. One is the outward supplies, the other one is the reverse charge mechanism, the other one is the inward supplies. So to start with, we will consider the outward supplies. What are the different outward supplies which we encounter in the regime of a GST audit? In the context of goods, it is an interstate supply. Then there is something called as a deemed export in the GST Act. We will see what is this deemed exports. Then goods sent on return basis. Here we have to be very crucial in checking the invoice date and date of removal, and when is the GST Act, does the GST Act provide for time of supply in case of goods sent on return basis. Services, we have interstate and intrastate, export of goods, export of services, sorry, then supply of goods or services to an SEC. In the context of outward supplies, what are the various things which an auditor will have to verify? The auditor will have to verify the outward supply registers with the GST invoice details. The first step to do audit is if a company has registration across India in different states, a company does not prepare a financial statement for states. You'll have to ask the registered person to give a trial balance for each state. This is critical because even the Form GSTR 9 and Form GSTR 9C has to be filed for each state, and it is not for the registered person for all India basis. So GSTN wise, trial balance has to be obtained. GST 3B for each state has to be obtained. Then GSTR 9 for each state has to be obtained. You may encounter one more issue if a registered person has appointed 2 or more auditors for different states. Then it becomes very critical that all the auditors who have been appointed for different states, they cross check with each other the outward supplies and inward supplies which have been given to them. There is no overlap, and especially when you're tying up the financial statements with the outward supplies which is mentioned in GSTR 9C, it totals up to the outward supplies which is in the consolidated financial statements. I will walk you through an example in the subsequent slides where these errors occur in the course of filling up the Form GSTR 9C when the registrations are there in various states. This reconciliation between GSTR 1, GSTR 3B, GSTR 9 financial statements, that is trial balance, will have to be done state-wise. Then we'll have to ask for the series of invoices. The invoice series might be different for different types of transactions which the SSE might be generating. Say for export, he might be using a prefix EX and then give a number to it. Then for the domestic, he might be using the word DOM and giving a series for that. And in case of services, he might be using service, some prefix or suffix for that. In this context, what is important to be verified is when invoices have been maintained for different series, for each series, the auditor has to check whether there is any jump in the invoice series. This can be done by using various Excel utility tools or audit tools to check. The relevance is that if there is any jump in the invoice series which has been generated, whether there was an invoice which has been raised, but there was some error in the accounting software which has not got reported, but invoices has been raised, GST has been paid, but not reported in the financial statements or vice versa. These are unlikely, but it is better to do a check. If there is a jump in invoice number, then it will have to be checked with the company whether there is any reason. The reasons could be various reasons, because in the ERP context, while raising an invoice, there might have been some problem, and because of the problem which was encountered by the person raising an invoice, they would have cancelled an invoice. It is not an invoice on which a transaction was liable to tax. Because of certain software issues, invoice had to be cancelled because the invoice could not be generated having the specific details, or there were certain errors. So in this context, the auditor will have to note down all these details in his working papers, so that he is sure that no transactions has missed in the context of outward supplies. Then in the context of audit, there is a common terminology which is used, cutoff procedures. What are these cutoff procedures? These cutoff procedure. Hello? Hello? Am I audible, sir? Hello?
You are audible, move on.
Okay, because some internet issue I was seeing on the...
Okay, fine.
Cutoff procedures will have to be verified carefully, especially where the goods have been dispatched or not delivered. The first example which I took, what is the nature of accounting which is followed by the supplier, time of supply under GST vis-a-vis revenue recognition policy, which is followed by the, which is mandated under the GST Act. What happens in the context of supply which is made in lots or installment? Under the GST Act, the supply which is made in lots or installments, there is no specific mention in the context of outward supplies, but in the context of inward supplies, there is a specific mention when the ITC has to be named. So in the case of supply made in lots or installments, as soon as the tax invoice is raised, as soon as the goods have been removed from the premises, a tax invoice has to be raised. But the revenue recognition policy of the company might be different. So in this context, if the goods have if the goods have been dispatched in lots, say from March 28th, and they continue to be dispatched over a period of even April 1st week, though the goods have been removed, then in this context, tax invoice would be raised, but this would not be available in the financial statement. So how does the auditor go to check whether tax has been paid in such cases? So in this context, it is very important to understand the industry and how the company operates. Accordingly, if any notes to accounts are mentioned that the revenue recognition policy is this method, then it would be important for the auditor to ask questions to the auditor saying that, okay, please mention what is the methodology in which you recognize your income where goods are sent in lots. This may be very relevant in case of turnkey contracts where goods are sent in lots. Say you are supplying solar panels where they are supplied in various lots. So in this context, carefully audited. Next one is export of goods or services, supply of goods or services by an SEZ without payment of integrated tax. In the financial statements, it would be shown as export, but there are certain specific checks which a person has to conduct in the context of GST audit. What are those certain checks which are required to be done? Under the GST Act, an exporter is entitled to export goods or supply services without payment of integrated tax. Similarly, supply goods or services to a SEZ developer or a SEZ unit without payment of integrated tax. But there are certain conditions which have been prescribed under the GST Act and rules. The GST Act requires that an exporter who wants to export a good without payment of integrated tax has to execute a LUT before the transaction is executed. Say for financial year 18-19, if the goods or services are planned to be supplied on April 5th, 2019, 2018, then the LUT should have been executed on or before April 2018. In this context, certain questions may arise that the goods and services have been exported, but the registered person has failed to raise a letter of undertaking in time, and in the mid of the financial year, the registered person has realized that he had to raise a LUT and he obtains a LUT in September. So what happens to transactions which have been executed between April to September? Does this mean that the transaction is liable to GST? In my view, it will not be, because this is only a procedural issue, and there is a circular which has been issued in this context wherein it is mentioned that for the purpose of claiming refund, if there is a delay in obtaining a LUT, such issues should not be considered for denying a refund. So considering this circular, it is circular number 3711 of 2018. Considering this, whether the auditor can take a judgment that, okay, this delay can be considered as not a delay, and the services or goods which have been exported or services or goods which have been supplied to an SEZ can be considered as a supply without payment of tax. One more important document which has to be verified in the context of export is the GST rule requires that the tax invoice has an endorsement on it that the goods or services have been supplied without payment of integrated tax. So the auditor has to check that where the goods or services have been exported without payment of tax, whether the tax invoice has this particular endorsement. It will be very critical. Again, the question will be raised, just because this endorsement is not there, whether it can be held as liable to tax. These would be more on the context of procedural issues, and if these endorsements are not there, it will be important for the auditor to note that, and how he has closed this issue, he has to make a note in his working notes. Then the next context is advances which are received for providing the services. In the context of services, if any advances have been received, the GST is required to be paid. Here, an important aspect which has to be noted is what is the methodology which the registered person is adopting for payment of tax on receipt of advances. Is the registered person on receipt of advances adopting inclusive method or exclusive method for payment of tax? Say, for example, the amount received by the registered person is 10 lakhs. Now, whether the 10 lakhs which has been received at the time of issuing the voucher and at the time of remittance of tax, whether it has been computed on 10 lakh is inclusive, 10 lakh inclusive of taxes or 10 lakhs exclusive of taxes, because this has very important implications when the tax invoice is raised. At the time when the tax invoice is raised, again, the tax amount is mentioned on the face of the tax invoice. So in this context, if the person has adopted an inclusive method, then at the time of issuing a tax invoice, a differential tax will have to be paid to the extent of inclusive method adopted for services. So what is the next important aspect which is relevant in the context of outward supplies? Transfer of goods from one state to another state. It is that is within a person who is registered in different states. If the goods have been supplied from one state to other state, under the GST, the Companies Act, or while preparing the financial statements, this is not considered as a revenue when the goods or services have been supplied from one state to other state. But for the purpose of GST, it is considered as a supply. How do we verify this? Because such transactions do not form part of financial statements. So in this context, it is required for the auditor to check whether there are any interstate transfers which are made by a registered person from one state to another state. Then what are the documents which are maintained? Generally, for movement of goods from one state to other state, a delivery challan is issued. Under the GST Act, a tax invoice will have to be issued for interstate movement of goods. So the list of invoices for interstate movement of goods should have to be checked, and whether all these interstate supply between the branches have been appropriately declared as an outward supply in the respective states. Then what happens if the capital goods are transferred? Is there any separate recognition that capital goods are transferred or regular stock has been transferred? There is no distinction. If the capital goods are transferred from one state to other state, again, it will be a supply. But what will happen in the context of input tax credit which has been claimed in the state in which it was capitalized earlier, and input tax credit, and then it is transferred to other state, will the implications of Rule 42 apply in this context will have to be checked. Then what certain companies have is they have a centralized purchasing of stationeries in bulk at their head office, and then they distribute these stationeries to the branches located in various states. So what happens is they would have just issued a delivery challan and sent off these stationeries, but this is also a goods. So does it require payment of tax? Yes, it is goods. Then how do we verify this? This will not be available readily from the financial statements. It will require the auditor to ask certain specific questions, knowing the procurement model and how the various procurements are distributed to the branches located across the states. This is a very interesting aspect which you can come across, where laptops are issued to the employees. The employees may be from one state to other state. Say in the context of certain projects, an employee is working in Mumbai. Subsequently, for a particular project, he has been deputed to another project on a temporary basis to Delhi. So in this case, he carries the laptop with him to another state for execution of a project in another state. So when the employee carries this and uses this laptop in a project in Delhi, whether this would constitute a supply will have to be analyzed. It is a next thing is when the employee returns back from the state of from Delhi to Maharashtra, whether again it will constitute a supply. How will this impact the taxes under GST? A thought can be given on this. How will you verify this? This will not be available from the financial statements. It will require the auditor to understand how the business operates in a particular environment, say a software industry or service industry, and knowing this aspect, such questions will have to be posed to the registered person. Next is, what happens if an employee is transferred from Maharashtra to Karnataka? It is not on a deputation basis for a particular project, but he has been transferred, he's taken a transfer to another state permanently. He carries the laptops from Maharashtra to Karnataka. So what happens? Is it a supply? Is it outward supply? Then what happens to the input tax credit claimed in the state of Maharashtra? If these have been capitalized, what is the implication of input tax credit on if it is recognized as capital goods? Will have to be verified carefully. Then goods which are sent for job work, which I mentioned in the beginning, goods which have been sent for job work to a job worker, you'll have to check with the principal of whose books the books of accounts are being audited. What is the mechanism? How are they maintaining the details of inputs which have been sent to a job worker? And here important aspect is how are they having a control to ensure that goods which have been sent have been received back within a period of 1 year. Because if the goods are not, inputs which have been sent are not received within a period of 1 year, then it will be constituted as a deemed supply in the hands of the principal. And in the context of capital goods, if they have been sent to the job worker, then it should be ensured that they have been received back within a period of 3 years from the date when they have been sent. This is similar to what we had in the context of central excise. A similar aspect has been covered under the GST. Now, a question comes is, we would come across because of at the time of filing the return, there is a possibility that there are certain errors which are made by the person while uploading a 3B. Say for example, CGST, SGST has been wrongly disclosed as IGST in the GSTR return. The issue which the auditor will encounter in this aspect. It is possible that this issue has been identified by the SSC at the time of filing the GSTR 9 return and he has rectified that. But this issue is an aspect which has already gone into 3B. So should the auditor make a note of it or report, or any specific disclosure has to be made? In this context, I would like to give a reference to one of the judgments which had come during the GST under the GST Act in the Kerala state, where the Kerala High Court mentioned in the case of Saji S, where it was mentioned that in case of wrong liability which has been disclosed and paid in the GSTR 3B, it is not required that the registered person has to claim a refund. It stated that the Honorable High Court held that the liability should be adjusted against the refund which was to be made, and the department is required to make the adjustment of the correct tax head in their account heads. So in such cases, if an auditor comes across such instances, notes should be made by the auditor and how he has given effect to that in the annual return by the registered person. He'll have to verify, and preferably if he wants to make a observation in the audit report, he can make a disclosure saying that such error has been occurred, but it has been rectified by the SSC in the GST or annual return, and reference can be given to the judgment of the Kerala High Court. Whether the Kerala High Court is applicable in all other states, the judgment would be applicable in the state in which the pronouncement has been made, but your analogy can be taken and given a mention in the audit observation of the GST report. Then there are certain aspects under the GST Act which should be considered as a supply, but it is not a supply or a revenue in the case of a company under the regular accounting practices. Supplies under Schedule 1 without consideration is considered as a deemed supply under the GST Act, and it requires a person to pay tax even if there is no consideration. Permanent transfer or disposal of business assets where input tax credit has been availed on such assets. Supply between related persons or distinct persons. Now, the example which we had discussed in the context of goods which have been stock transferred from the state of Maharashtra to the state of Delhi. In this case, there is no consideration which the state of Maharashtra will receive. But under the GST Act, this is considered as a deemed supply. So these aspects will have to be verified specifically under the GST law, though these are not considered as a revenue in the context of financial statements which is prepared for the company as a whole. Credit notes has been in discussion right from the inception in the GST Act. The credit note has been litigation even under the VAT Acts in various states. In Karnataka also there have been many disputes in the context of credit notes. What does a credit note mean under the GST Act when a credit note can be issued? Section 34 mentions that a credit note can be issued when a taxable value in a tax invoice is found to exceed the taxable value of supply made, when tax charged in the tax invoice is found to exceed the tax payable, goods supplied have been returned, goods or services or both supplied are deficient. And it provides a condition that in all this context, a credit note which has to be issued for a financial year, it should be issued not later than September of the meaning of credit notes. There is no mention of discount mentioned in the credit notes. Then there is a mention under the CGST Act under section 15 saying that credit note can be issued for post-supplied credit notes can be issued for discounts which have been given on a post-supply subject to certain conditions. Okay, we'll come to that aspect subsequently. Now the issue is when there is no mention of discount in a section relating to credit notes in section 34, then how is that a person can issue a credit note assuming all the conditions for my reading is that the first one which says tax value in the tax invoice is found to exceed the tax value of supply made. Initially, when I made the supply, the tax value was 100 rupees which had been given. So reading in this context, a credit note can be issued by a supplier subject to the conditions. Now, if you see section 15, credit note issued for discount for post of supply, it gives two conditions. It states that it should be supported by agreement to establish the same and links to invoices for which discount has been given. So what is the supporting agreements? It requires for the auditor to check if there have been any agreements which the supplier has entered with his customers saying that he will issue a discount subsequent to the supplies made by him, say a target discount. And now there have been disputes saying that whether draw your attention to one of the conditions which was there under the sales tax law of the Andhra Pradesh in the context of a works contractor, where it required that for the contractor to claim a deduction from subcontractor, it has to be verified by the subcontractor it has to be verified by the contractor that the subcontractor has disclosed the supplies made by, disclosed the sales or works contract executed by the subcontractor to the main contractor, sales transaction in his return, and he has also remitted his taxes on the same. This was a requirement which was there under the sales tax law. In this context, the main contractor contested this issue. This was in the case of Media 5 STC 227, where the Honorable High Court held that information relating to whether the subcontractor has disclosed the sales in his returns and whether he has paid the taxes, this can be verified by the taxing authority by seeing the returns of the subcontractor, and it is near impossible for a subcontractor to verify that whether the subcontractor has disclosed such transaction in his return, and requiring a subcontractor to check that whether the subcontractor has disclosed such sales in his return is very unreasonable. So considering this judgment, whether the imposition under the CGST Act requiring the supplier to verify whether the recipient has reversed the input tax credit in respect of credit note issued for post-supply discount appears to be a bit unreasonable. This condition has been mentioned only in the case of post-supply discount. Now, this condition has not been mentioned in the case of outward supplies which has been made, which has been returned by the person, sales return for our example. So, whether there is a requirement to verify whether the input tax credit has been reversed by the recipient, there is no such requirement mentioned under the CGST Act. But as an auditor, it would be better for the auditor to check how the registered person has taken certain confirmations for post-supply discount. One method which can be adopted is the supplier can ask a confirmation from the recipient by way of a certificate stating that he has reversed the input tax credit, and this document can be maintained by the supplier by asking the recipient to provide this. Whether the recipient provides or not is next debate which will be there. Not all the recipient may be willing to do that, but an attempt can be made. Take note in the context of post-supply discount. Even whether the analogies of Arise India, which went up to the Supreme Court, whether that can be applied if any disputes come, can be noted by the auditor, and whether he needs to give any.
It's okay, read it. What else?
Okay. See, in this illustration which is mentioned, the registered person has registration in Mumbai, Bangalore and Delhi. Revenue from customers in the various states is 200, 150. In Bangalore, Delhi it is 150, and totaling up to 500 in the financial statements on a consolidated basis. There is a service which is provided by Bangalore to Mumbai. For this, a tax invoice is raised by Bangalore to Mumbai, say 10 rupees. Similarly, service is provided by Mumbai to Bangalore, and the value of services provided is 20. And similarly, services provided by Delhi to Mumbai is 30. So if you see the services which is provided to the third party is 200 by Mumbai, then services provided by Mumbai to Bangalore is 20. So the value of services provided by Mumbai is 220. Now we have to be careful while disclosing this value. In table 5A, the table 5A requires us to disclose the turnover which is appearing in the financial statements on a consolidated basis. So in this example, the revenue in the GSTN of Mumbai will be 200 and not 220. Similarly, for Mumbai, it will be 150 and not 160. 160 consists of supply made from Bangalore to Mumbai. So on a total basis, the revenue from operations of the company as a whole is 500, but on a totality basis, it is 560. So when the revenue is being disclosed as per financial statements in table 5A, precaution has to be taken that the turnovers which are disclosed in various states, these have to be totaled up and ensure that it matches with the financial statements of the registered person. Then turnover as per audited financial statements only will have to be declared here. The deemed supplies which we discussed in the earlier slide, where stock transfers have been made, these stock transfer outward supplies will not form part of table 5A. Precautions have to be taken. Then care has to be taken in the financial statements. Apart from the main revenue, say sales and services, there will be other incomes like interest income. This has to be disclosed. How the treatment has to be given as a adjustment in 9C, there are separate disclosures to be made, which the auditor has to take care. So 5A will not include only the turnover relating to supply which are liable to GST, which is disclosed in the financial statements. Even interest income on fixed deposits, miscellaneous income will have to be disclosed here. Then GST was invoice the liabilities, whether they have been disclosed correctly. Again, the jump in invoice series numbers will have to be verified by the auditor for each state. Checkpoints which auditor has to take into consideration for table 5A is ensure that the turnovers declared for different registration on pan-India basis matches. If the financial statements are not required to be audited under any other law, then what is the requirement in this case? Then the auditor, he'll have to do an audit on his own, because if you see the GSTR form 9C, it has two parts to it, where the audit is conducted under any other law and where an audit is not conducted under any other law. Then the precautions have to be taken how to do an audit in this context. GST declared in GST returns will have to be reconciled with the income tax returns also. A precaution will have to be taken in this context. Unbilled revenue. This is a very common terminology which will come across in the service industry. Especially service industries have this context of unbilled revenue. What is an unbilled revenue? Most of the financial statements will mention what is an unbilled revenue. Generally, unbilled revenue is a terminology used wherein certain costs have been incurred for providing the services, but the milestone for raising the invoice is not reached. We'll take an example of a software. The software company has entered into an agreement to develop a software and give it to its customer. So it will mention phase 1, we will develop a certain purchase model. In phase 2, we'll develop sales model. In phase 3, we'll do the testing. So the contract has been entered assuming on March 1st for the new customer. So what will happen is the company which is providing the services will be incurring costs. What would be the cost? The cost would be the software people who are engaged in this. In this context, what happens is the phase for the, giving the sales patch has not yet reached on 31st March 2019, but the costs have been incurred. So in this case, generally what happens is the companies recognize the revenue to the extent of what cost has been incurred, but they recognize this revenue, but for this invoices have not been issued to the customer because the milestone not been achieved. Assuming the milestone gets achieved in April 30th, 2019. So what happens is unbilled revenue which is there of 2017-18, the invoices get raised in the year of 2019-20. So how is the treatment which the company is giving effect to this will have to be verified. In this example, I will say that during the year 17-18, revenue of financial year. So to determine what is the unbilled revenue at the beginning of the financial year 2018-19, we will have to verify the unbilled revenue which was disclosed in 2017-18. So you will have to verify the financial statements of 2017-18 to disclose what is there for 2018-19 in 5B. In this example, if rupees 10 crores was the unbilled revenue during the financial year 17-18, GST, if it has been paid for 4 crores, to that extent, it will get, to that extent, this will have to be disclosed in 9C. What happens to the extent of unbilled revenue which is gone beyond even 18-19, the company will keep a track of what has been billed or unbilled. So it is very critical for the auditor to ask what is the unbilled revenue which was there in 17-18, how much has been billed in 18-19, how much has been billed in 19-20. So all these workings have to be verified for the appropriate disclosures in 5B. Similar is the context of unbilled revenue at the end of the financial year. It is just the reverse of that. To verify what is the unbilled revenue at the end of the financial year, the notes to accounts will have to be verified for the financial year 17, for financial 18. In the context of advances, how the disclosures have to be made is just mentioned here. What happens is if advances have been received in financial year 17-18, then in 18-19, tax invoices have been issued. So taxes have already been paid in 17-18, but in 18-19, tax invoices have been raised. So how these particular disclosures have to be made is mentioned in this slide. People can see this slide at a later point of time. What is deemed supply has already been covered by me in the earlier slides. This slide gives the various illustrations of deemed supply. Then the deemed supply is in the context of related parties also will have to be verified. In this context, the notes to accounts and the transfer pricing reports will have to be verified how the supplies are recognized in the revenue or not.
Siddharji,
Yes, madam.
you have to be little faster because there are queries on the chat box.
Okay. This context of 5.0 is very dangerous. Don't just bring everything which you can't adjust in 5.0 in this particular column, because it is better that all the relevant adjustments are made in 5B to 5N, and only those adjustments which can be disclosed in the respective columns have to be brought in 5.0. Precautions have to be taken here. Now, what happens in the case of RCM? What are the records which a person is required to maintain? In the case of RCM, in case of domestic supplies, the auditor has to verify whether self-generated invoices have been generated by the person who has received these services, and also it requires a payment voucher which has to be generated by the registered person. So there are two documents which are required in the context of RCM. One is the self-generated invoice and other is the payment voucher. And what are the tests which an auditor has to verify in the context of RCM is they'll have to verify the expense ledgers to check what are the applicability of RCM. One would be GTA, other is sponsorship, other is legal services from advocates, director services, services. If you verify the expense ledgers, you will be able to identify the various implications of RCM and whether the registered person has paid the taxes. In case of import of services, one of the other documents which can be handy is your payments which have been made in convertible foreign exchange. You will have to analyze the various payments which have been made in convertible foreign exchange to check the applicability of RCM. Next, we will move to input tax credit. This will require a detailed examination of purchase register and the input register for each GSTN. We'll have to analyze the applicability of eligibility of input tax credit for each GSTN. Say, for example, if he is registered in 3 states, the input tax credit register has to be verified for each state. Apart from verifying the eligibility, you will have to verify what happens in case the consideration has not been paid within 180 days, whether it requires a reversal of input tax credit. Yes, under the GST Act, it will require a reversal of input tax credit, and it requires that a person will have to pay interest from the date he has claimed the credit till the date of reversal. And when the payment has been made, the registered person is again entitled to take the credit. So you will have to verify the workings in this context. This will not be readily available. These are the particular records which the auditor will have to ask. Then in the context of COVID, which I discussed, how are the particular requirements you have to check, especially if the goods have not received, then the person is not entitled to claim the credit. Then you will have to verify the GRN delivery challan for receipt of goods. The cutoff procedures are very critical even in case of input tax credit. Then what happens in case the goods are received in installment basis? ITC can be claimed only on the receipt of last lot or installment. So how do you verify this? You will have to check how the invoices have been issued by the supplier and the gate passes and also the GRNs which have been there, and ask the SSC to provide the respective lot, which lot has been received and whether it has been received on the date of receipt of last lot. Obtain a reconciliation of input tax credit claimed in GSTR 3B and 2A. Here I would like to caution everybody that whatever input tax credit comes into GSTR 2A, a registered person may not be entitled to credit. Say for example, a person while uploading GSTR 1, instead of mentioning the GSTR registration of Mr. X, he mentions the registration of company Y inadvertently, then the input tax credit will come and sit in the input tax credit will automatically come and sit in GSTR 2A. So it has to be verified whether the goods or services received by the particular registered person belong to him or any such errors have happened. Then it will require to check whether such wrong input tax credit which was not available for the registered person has been claimed. If such input tax credit has been claimed, then it will be the requirement of the auditor to get such input tax credit reversed. Then in case of input tax credit of capital goods, what are the conditions which have been mentioned is already mentioned in the earlier slides. Then what are the special checks which have to be done? In the context of input tax credit, you will have to verify whether all the invoices which have been issued by the vendor, does it have the requisite contents of a tax invoice. Sometimes there is a mention on the tax invoice saying that this is a computer generated invoice and does not require a signature. By mentioning this, does this make a tax invoice invalid? In the hands of the registered person who has received that, I think this should not be a problem. It will be a problem in the case of the supplier, because for claiming the input tax credit, certain relaxation have been provided in the context of tax invoices. Then you have to verify the input service distributed invoices where input tax credit has been claimed by the branches. Then verify whether the credits have been claimed correctly. During the course of audit, we have come across where at the time of recording, CGST, SGST has been wrongly claimed as IGST, and IGST has been wrongly claimed as CGST, SGST. So how this incorrect input tax credit which has been recorded and also disclosed in 3B, what is the treatment which the auditor has to give in the form GSTR 9C, or any disclosure has to be made by the auditor will have to be considered. Then also reversal of input tax credit in the context of Rule 42 and 43 also will have to be verified. Then there was a mention where goods have been supplied and the company Y has received the goods. Suppose the company Y returns the goods to the company X, then there is a requirement that the person who has claimed the credit and sent back the goods, the ITC is reversed in such cases. So it is the duty of the auditor to check whether ITC in case of purchase returns have been reversed in the books of accounts and in 3B in the month in which the purchase returns have been done. Similarly, in case where credit notes have been given for discounts issued by the supplier, whether the person has reversed the input tax credit. And certain other reviews which an auditor can take at the time of audit. Some of the practices are, you can do an analytical review of procedures, a review of ratio analysis can be done, comparison of the financial statements of 17-18 with 18-19 for the period in which the audit is done, comparison of 9 and 9C of the previous years with the comparison of annual returns of previous year with the current year for which the audit is being done. Then the sampling techniques has to be added, wherein the documentation has to be prepared appropriately by the auditor in case if any questions are raised about where the conduct audit is done, what are the tax invoices the auditor has varied, how he has gone about verifying the input tax, what are the documents he has verified. Then if the registered person has relied on some opinion of the experts for taking certain tax position, then the auditor is to required to keep this as a part of his working paper. The management representations which the company has given to the auditor, management representation is not a substitute. It should, care should be taken that if there are any deviations which require to be reported, the auditor should report any transactions by way of audit observations or qualifications by way of annexure to the audit report which is filed in Form GSTR 9C. Then in case where refunds have been claimed, initially what happens is when a refund has been filed by a registered person, a provisional refund is issued to them 90%, and at a later date when the documents are verified by the department may disallow certain credits. Then it may so happen that the credits which have been issued by the department was more at the time of provisional refund and it is lesser at the time of final order. Then how this refund which has been erroneously, not erroneously, which has been disallowed, how this treatment has been given in the books of accounts, and also there is a specific requirement under GSTR 9C to report this aspect. Then they have to obtain copies of any notices which have been issued by the tax department, if there is any inspection which has been done by the tax department, if any orders have been issued by the GST department, the replies filed, these all will have to be checked by the auditor only to understand is there any issues which the registered person is facing and what are the implications of that even in the on the transactions which the auditor is verifying during the course of audit. Does he have to make a note of it and does he have to give a audit observation? In such cases he have to make a note and make a appropriate disclosure. If any appeal has been filed by the registered person, the status of the same, if the appeal has not been disposed, will it require for the auditor to check this and does it have an implication on the audit report, will have to be verified by the auditor. So these are some of the aspects which we can verify during the course of the audit. These are not an exhaustive list. These are some of the issues which are discussed in my paper. There will be many issues which an auditor will have to do. One more aspect which questions may be raised is, then what are we going beyond the role prescribed in the press release? I think so. We are not going role which is prescribed press release because the 9C only examine and report if the books of accounts are maintained properly or not. Yes, the questions may be raised whether the auditor should comment on valuation, whether he should comment on the classification. Okay, there are some experts view that since the press release has issued that it is the duty of the auditor only to reconcile, then if the auditor is not going to report any of such issues, then the auditor can take a step by making a mention in his audit report saying that the scope of the audit which he has done does not cover, not a what you say end of the list for what the verifications can be done by auditor during conducting an audit. There are many other aspects which will have to be verified, and as and when the audit is being conducted, auditor may come across certain other issues which he may have to do a deep dive. The only difference is that I would like to bring to the attention of everyone is audit is an examination and not an investigation. So auditor is a watchdog and not a bloodhound.
Precisely. Thank you. Siddesh, you have been
Madam, madam,
only queries.
madam,
Ask Srinivasa.
only query, only one
Tell
query,
me.
only one query.
Yes.
In relating to the 9C report, we would like to make a comment Siddesh is not audible in that particular area. I would like to add one more thing that should be clarified by Siddesh.
Sir, if you have any observations which are required to be, am I?
Yes, you are audible.
Sir, you are audible. You
Don't
are
share
audible.
the screen.
He will. Acha, Siddesh,
Screen
Siddesh,
is not required. Screen is not required.
Siddesh, I'm telling you something. If the query is too wide, just go to the chat box. There are many. You want me to go?
No, simple one question.
Yes,
Madam.
follow.
One question, please give me opportunity.
Yes.
In relating to 9C, from the 3CB, 3CD, we are doing the audit
I understand.
under the form of 3CB. We are observing that in a small comment, due to the technical constraints and aspects of the thorough detailed audit, we would like to give this report like that. We have made a comment already. That comment is going on in 3CB
Okay.
also. For which, like that, any comment we should write in the 9C if it is possible, because 160 characters is already available in the 9C
Sir,
form.
there is a character limitation even in GSTR 9C. So what you can do is, in the box where it requires the auditor to give an observation or clarification, you can mention that as refer annexure 1. What you can do is your list of observation and qualification. You can mention, you can make a Word file, convert that into PDF. While uploading Form
Yes.
GSTR 9C, you can upload financial statement, profit and loss account, balance sheet, and it gives you an additional document which can be uploaded. So what you can do is, you can convert this annexure 1 into PDF format and attach this as annexure 2 in the portal, and when you upload this, it will get attached.
Yes. And in addition to that, whenever some disturbances are happened in filing 9C, when we are filing a revised 9C, can we get the UDN number? If it is possible, one UDN number is enough for the both.
Yeah. Sir, UDN number, if you are going to cancel that, you have to keep a record of that. If you generate a new UDIN, a good practice is that you mention the UDIN in the annexure 1 Word format which you have. You mention that there and convert that into PDF. And if people are having digital signatures, I think most of them have it, to attach that digital signature to that PDF file.
Okay, that is the procedure, no problem. My query is, if the UDN number, we can file a revised 9C, that 9C required another
Sir,
UDN number?
UDN is not required under the GST Act. It is required under the...
No, it is not required. They may compulsion.
It is required
If
under
the government may compulsion.
compulsory under the institute guidelines to mention the UDI. You have to generate that. So where is the place you generate and mention it is in annexure 1. If there has become some error in...
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Then one small
Yes, now there are
bit of
other
query.
queries.
Relating to trial
There are
balance
other
of the
people
each states
on chat,
of
let
supplies.
them. Srinivas Rao, come later.
Arre, madam, small query.
Okay.
Madam,
Last
small query,
query.
please. Actually, in relating to the trading account of the each and every state while supplying, is it eligible? The consolidated trading account should be keep in our written
I
forms.
lost you. Sir, your voice is not
instead of supplying all trial balances to the in GST portal, we would like to supply any consolidated trial balance. Hello.
Srinivas Rao.
म्यूट कर दिया. अरे म्यूट कर दिया मैडम. अरे
अरे हमने नहीं mute किया आपको.
वैल्यूबल.
I haven't muted you, Mr.
सिद्धेश.
Sir, it is not muted.
Siddesh.
बोलिए सिद्धेश, you tell me.
Okay, Siddesh. Are you hearing?
Yeah.
Would you go back to the chat box? There are 3-4 important queries.
Madam, the chat box has got.
Okay, let me read.
Yeah.
Because one or two are big one or two are small one also. There is one regarding the cotton oil manufacturer
Okay.
purchases. He purchases cotton from URD and paid the tax under RCM and process it to kapas.
Okay.
And cotton seed sells kapas. Now he buys cotton seeds from registered dealers and manufactures oil and oil cake and sell oil cake and adjusts the tax through credit ledger. I don't know. There appears to be incomplete. Ek minute.
No, what he is trying to
Madam,
find
not
out.
audible.
Ek minute. Sales cotton cake, it is exempt. Sales, we can make it tax reverse. If yes, how? We paid an RCM and on URD cotton and purchase. Okay. His query is he's purchasing from RD and URD both. So in case of reversal, how he can apportion or something like that.
No, see, in case of URD for goods, there is no requirement to pay tax under RCM for URD. It is only specified services.
Okay.
Okay.
Now somebody else, Pardosh Patnayak, he says, Pardosh, you are there, you can speak out fast. Unmute yourself. Okay, Pardosh, go ahead.
My question is, I have claimed some excess ITC while filing 3B during 17-18. Okay,
Sir,
Yes.
and the state ITC.
Siddheshwar, are you okay? Are you hearing?
hello.
Hello.
We have lost him.
Siddesh, are you there?
I lost.
His net connection is not proper.
Oh yeah.
No,
We will come back. Just give 1 minute. Siddesh, you are there.
yeah. Sorry, because of this network issues.
All right, Pradosh, go ahead. Come on. We have
Yeah. Yeah. My question is, in 17-18, I have claimed some excess ITC wrongly,
Okay.
and the said ITC has been reversed while filing 3B for the month of September 2019.
Okay.
But missed to report the same in GSTR 9 and 9C for the year 17-18.
Okay.
My question is there any scope for reporting the same of filing GSTR 9 and 99 of 2018-19? Can it be
Yeah, you
reported in?
Yeah, you can give that by way of audit observation.
Okay.
See, what happens is you have made this rectification and that has got rectified in the 3B
Yes.
of subsequent financial year.
Yes.
So what you can do is you can give a mention saying that the excess ITC which was claimed in 17-18, the dealer has appropriately reversed that and paid that with interest. So
Yes.
even during any questions which are raised in 17-18 assessment, you can give the 18-19 audit report state that proper care has been taken on this aspect.
Okay.
Okay, one more question by Mr. Neeraj Agarwal. I don't know whether he's around. Is let me know where we show the correction in GSTR 9 when we made for the year 17-18 in GSTR 3B for the year 18-19.
Is it on output or input?
Neeraj, you are there? Neeraj Agarwal?
He is not there, madam.
So any corrections?
Siddesh, my query you should have to fill up.
Sir, I'll call him and discuss, sir. I think your voice is
Okay,
breaking.
Thank you.
I'll answer that in.
Bye.
Okay,
Okay.
answer generally. Yes, generally.
Assuming if there is an error in the outward supply, the GSTR 9 instruction says that if there is any mistake in the outward supplies, it can be rectified in GSTR 9 and the taxes can be paid appropriately. But in the context of input tax credit, it mentions that no corrections can be made in annual return. What has been disclosed in 3B only has to be disclosed in 9. The instruction 9 can be verified.
Oh, this is very interesting. Of course, a general question. does the discount agreement needs to be on stamp paper notarized or on a letterhead of the dealer signed by both supplier as well as customer?
On the stamp act, I'm not an expert, but generally, if any agreements are entered, I think you have to enter it under the requisite stamps, the preferred one.
No, this
Otherwise,
is about the discount. See this. We say that this.
As per stamping act, it should be required, madam.
Please mute yourself for a while. Siddesh, for the purpose of discount, I think what we normally say is that the policy of discount should be known generally and decided in advance, right? Then only the discount is allowable. It is in that
Yes.
context the question is asked.
Yeah, the discount, whatever is terms is there, it should be in the agreement in writing, because we'll have to demonstrate that what are the terms. Because if you refer to the Ultratech advance ruling, which went to the appellate authority, in that case, the terms of the discount of target discount was very vaguely written. So in that context, the advance ruling authority went to state that the terms of discount which you want to give in case of co-supply, it should be documented appropriately, giving what are the conditions and at what point of time the discount should be given. So oral agreement will not help for your substantiation under the GST Act. It should be a written agreement.
Okay, there are two persons who have raised the hand. They can come in one by one, please. Any person has the query can come in one by one. Yes, please. Your voice is breaking little loud.
Sir, I think you have to bring your mic nearer.
It's Vinod Miske.
Can't hear.
You are not audible, sir. Mr. Vinod, you are not audible. Mr. Vinod Miskin, you are not audible.
Next one.
Can you put in chat box, Mr. Vinod?
So we can't hear anything.
Sir, in this context, you can rectify that. I think he's mentioned says instead of declaring 5,250, declared incorrectly 5,25,000 in the 3B. Yeah. So in this context, what rectifications in respect of auto supply is required to be made? It should be done in annual return. You should do it in the annual return, sir.
There are no counter questions, Nikita.
No counter question. Hello. We have only 3-4 minutes left. Somebody has some important short query, they can come in and ask. Somebody has raised the hand, but I cannot see him. There are a lot of people. श्रीनिवास जी आप तो आएंगे ही, चलो आ जाइए.
हाँ ठीक है. Thank you, madam. Thank you. From all our states, can we file a consolidated trial balance in our GSTR forms, if it is possible or not?
Sir, the GST and the trial balance is for the purpose of preparing the GSTR 9C. There is no requirement to file a GSTR trial balance.
No. That contents. You have already told that every state will be separate trial balance.
Yes.
In your presentation, that's what I'm asking is, if it is consolidated with the all of affairs in all states, and we should put into our forms in GSTR, is it possible?
No, sir. You have to declare the respective state's turnover in the respective GSTR.
No. Okay. I will give the respective turnover. There is no bar at all.
Okay.
But relating to the trial balance, you prepare a separate trial balance of each and every state is required or consolidated
Yes.
is required. There is only
Sir,
small
that
query.
preparation of separate trial balance is the basis for which the auditor to verify that. Without having a separate trial
Yes.
balance, he'll not be able to verify.
Yes,
All
yes.
right,
one-
thank you. The last query, Siddesh.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
There is wrong reporting of sales by say instead of 5250 in 3B it is declared as 5,25,000. How to correct it in 3B? Now this is the question
yeah.
actually.
This question, what is the appropriate disclosures you have to do in GSTR 9 that can be rectified? If you see the note to GSTR 9, it mentions that any errors which have happened in the context of outward supply that can be rectified in 9. One more step what the auditor can do is in his observations to the GSTR 9C report, he can make a mention of this and also give how the adjustment has been given effect in 9 and 9C. So that will close the loop for that aspect.
All right, so Siddesh, I think we must end now. One query, Mr. PC Joshi, please. बोलिए सर. सर आपने म्यूट किया. सर unmute yourself.
My
हाँ.
question is,
Yes.
whether the auditor is supposed to advise the SSC whatever discrepancies have been found can be made good in the later year.
Yes, sir. As a separate report, he can give suggestions to the SSC what corrections can be done. That can be what discrepancies he has observed. He can inform the SSC what corrective action can be taken going forward.
No, but it should form part of the report.
Those discrepancies which are there, he can give as a part of the observation. But one aspect which everybody are raising is whether valuation issues, classification issues should be reported. Based on that press release, the auditor is not required to go into that aspect.
No, but
It is not required to be reported.
oh, I see. So there are
No.
bound to be problems.
Yes, there will be because these issues were. Sir, actually, this issue was. Yes, madam.
One more clarification, Nikita.
Yes, sir.
About the Siddheshwar said that the Kerala High Court judgment is not binding on other states. The principle of interpretation is that the judgment of the High Court binds everybody unless the jurisdictional High Court has given a contrary judgment. So the judgment of any High Court is binding all over the country unless there is a contrary judgment of the jurisdictional High Court.
And especially when the law is one.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially,
Of course, then, we are talking about uniform law only.
right. So friends, now we are closing, only 1 minute left. Siddesh?
General observation, Nikita,
Yes, please.
general observation, I
Yes.
think some of the people have taken this type of conversation very lightly. Some people have found sleeping and hearing, or some people put the camera blank near his chair and
Participating, it's okay. No disrespect as such. They are listening. That's more than enough. That's what I feel. But thank you very much. People would understand anywhere in their own way. Siddesh?
okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, Siddesh, there has been, let us give word of thanks to Siddesh, please. There has been various, multiple thank you in the chat box, which you are not able to see. And let us all agree to one point. Siddesh has given exhaustive talk on the minutest issues which one can face while auditing under the GST Act. And we all give you a clap.
Thank you.
in a big
Madam,
way.
I thank you. for
Yes,
giving the
Siddesh,
opportunity.
thank you very much.